Good afternoon. It's 1400 hours, 2 p.m. We're going to give it 1 minute or two just to make sure everybody that's supposed to join us has joined us. This is Ed Mann, the Director of Training and Education for Provident. Thank you all for joining us. Let's stand by here a moment or two, or for those of you into the firehouse lingo, let's stage for a minute or two. I have 2 o'clock on my computer. We'll give it to 2:01, then we're going to roll. Again, I appreciate all of you taking the time from your schedules to join us. This will be recorded. It'll be available at the Provident YouTube channel. So if you want to watch it again or share it with your membership or anybody else, you'll be able to do so. So according to my clock, it's 2:01 and we're going to get started. Welcome to another Provident webinar. I'm your host, Ed Mann, Director of Training and Education. Today, I'm excited to have Tiger Schmittendorf with us to help us all better understand the world of recruiting and retention. In a few moments, I'll have Tiger tell you about himself and his career and how he became a nationally known expert on the subject of recruiting and retention. This webinar is a follow-up to the podcast we did earlier this month. Please note, we're not here today to rehash the problems the volunteer fire service is experiencing with recruiting and retention. Tiger is going to provide some solid solutions that you can use to help your department. I'm sure we'll have plenty of questions throughout the program. We're asking that you use the question and answer feature to send your questions, and we'll attempt to have Tiger answer all of them. If we can't get them all answered in our allotted time, we'll get the answers to you via email in a few days following the webinar. I want to run through a couple of slides quick to introduce you to Provident in case you're not familiar with Provident and what we do. Provident started as an independent insurance company in the Pittsburgh area in 1902. In 1928, they began servicing volunteer fire departments with a customized blanket and accident insurance policies. Today, we provide volunteer, combination, and career firefighters and emergency medical services personnel with a multitude of programs. We also offer special risk and transportation insurance programs. Provident's been named the top insurance workplace by Insurance Business America magazine for the last 3 years. The programs that we offer to emergency services, we have an accident and health program. Part of that accident health program is our first responders assistance program, something we're very proud of at Provident. A 24-hour accidental death and dismemberment policy that you can purchase, group term life, critical illness and cancer, and then our Fire Plus property and casualty insurance. And if you're a client with our Fire Plus property and casualty insurance, you and your membership would have access to our free online training platform known as the Fire Plus Academy. So without further ado, I'm proud to introduce Tiger Schmittendorf, who's going to provide you with information. And the title of today's topic is, are you ready for your next recruit? Tiger is the Vice President for Recruitment and Retention for a firm by the name of First Arriving. I'm going to stop sharing and turn the program over to Tiger. There you go, Tiger. It's all yours.
Thank you so much, Ed. And thank you to Sam for playing the background producer today and helping us out and putting together this webinar. And certainly thank you to the partnership that we enjoy with your great company, Provident Insurance. I absolutely love talking about recruitment and retention. It is my life, one of my life's many passions, but certainly ranks right up there at the top. I affectionately refer to it as I've made a career out of it. And I just enjoy so much the opportunity to help people on such a larger scale. So we're going to get started. We're going to get right into it. And I'm going to ask some pointed questions, so to speak, of, are you ready for your next recruit? So what does that mean? Are you ready for your next recruit? I'm a marketing guy, so I like to go straight to the marketing phase. But really what we need to do today is to step back and take a look at, are we even ready? Is our department and are we in a position to even bring new people into our organization? And that's a question that we all have to ask ourselves. And we need to ask it as an organization as well. So as we step through the process here today, we're going to touch on several subjects, and just like we do in the fire service, we're going to do some size up, which obviously always has to include a 360. We're going to talk about strategy, and we're also going to talk about tactics. And as a little background on me, as Ed said, I'm the Vice President of Strategic Recruitment and Retention Services for First Arriving. We're a full service marketing team headquartered actually where I am right now at the moment in Richmond, Virginia. And we provide a variety of services and are actually concurrently helping close to 100 fire departments around the nation with the recruitment and retention challenges, their marketing challenges, and also their technology as well, which is, we all know, technology is pervasive in everything that we do in fire and emergency services. So as we talk about that, a little background on me and kind of how I got to be at this point in my life and in my career. Aside from being the vice president for First Arriving, first and foremost, I'm a firefighter. I have 4 decades of service to the Evans Center Volunteer Fire Company in Angola, New York. That's where I live. I'm blessed to be in a position to work from home and travel and spend a lot of time in a lot of firehouses around the US and Canada over the last several years. But I show this slide just as a point of contact, but also to demonstrate something that I've thought for a long time, and that is to connect with specifically today's generation of both firefighters and those we're hoping to bring into the volunteer fire service. You need to be on all channels all the time. And Lori, my wife, refers to my GoDaddy account as my crack habit, because I collect websites like some people collect fire memorabilia. And I won't get into each of them, but each of them is really a different compartment of my life inside and outside the fire service. But again, it's an outward demonstration of the need to be on all channels all the time as a means of connecting with both prospective and existing volunteer firefighters and those who get to do what we do. So as I start every conversation related to recruitment and retention, we have to do a size up. So I'm going to ask some burning questions, and some of these are somewhat rhetorical. But if you'd like to add your comments in the chat, please feel welcome to do that. So the first question is, what business are we in? When you strip away all the roles, responsibilities, and responses that today's volunteer fire department is engaged in, is called to, sometimes we see problems and challenges and opportunities, and we simply jump in with both feet. And others were called to duty to respond to as well. When you strip away all of that laundry list of emergencies and non-emergencies, calls for service that were brought to every single day, what business are we really in? And while you have may form your own opinion related to that, and common responses to this are, we're in public safety, we're in public education, we're in the do whatever it takes business, and we're in the emergency response business. At the end of the day, it's my belief, at the core of everything that we do, what we really are in is the people business. If you think about it, every single thing that we do in fire and emergency services is about people. And probably, at least historically, the large majority of where we spend our time and energy is on the for people part. The people that we respond to make their bad day just a little better as best we can. But what's equally as important is the with people part. And quite honestly, a large contributor to the reason we're in the situation that we're in today's volunteer fire service is because we focused all of our time and energy, and to a certain extent, all of our money as well, on the for people part. And we tend to have ignored the with people part. And we see that in the means of diminishing rosters. Also, people who are continuing to volunteer, not being able to commit the same time level of time and energy as they once were, and in a variety of outcomes. And for many people in many volunteer fire departments and EMS agencies, it's a perfect storm. They find themselves in a situation that is simply not sustainable under its current configuration. Now, as we go through some of the exercises that I'm going to share with you, basically a framework for assessing the situation that your fire department is in, one of the things we'll look at is which of those conditions are within our control, which are simply out of our control, and which of those with some investment of time and energy can we actually have impact on. Back in 1989, Chief Jack Snook of the Tualatin Valley, Oregon Fire Rescue Department wrote what was long considered, and even so today, the manual, if you will, on volunteer recruitment and retention. And absent of any introduction or even existence of the internet when that was first written, there's still very relevant insight in that guidebook. And in the opening pages, Chief Snook made this very bold statement. And by no means was he disregarding volunteers, because he was one himself, but he made the simple statement: the problem with volunteers is that they're volunteers. The problem with volunteers is that they're volunteers. So really what I think Chief Snook was saying, and I've had the opportunity to both take training from him and meet him personally and have conversations with him. What Chief Snook was getting at was, in the absence of a paycheck to either motivate people with or hold them accountable with, where does their motivation have to come from? That motivation absolutely has to come from within. And quite honestly, that statement is true whether or not you earn a paycheck or not. And my good friend, Chief Tom Merrill from the Snyder Fire Department in the Buffalo, New York area, where I'm from, in his class titled The Professional Volunteer Firefighter, reiterates the fact that earning a paycheck does not define you as a professional. It's all about attitude, and it's about the way you interact and engage with your fellow firefighters and your community. It's not that paycheck that defines you as a professional. So we have to take that into consideration throughout all of our conversations as it relates to the problem with volunteers is that they're volunteers. As I say often, we can no longer hide behind the fact that, well, we're just volunteers and we're doing the best we can, because we have a moral and real life and often contractual and monetary relationship and expectation that we will provide consistently reliable, responsive, and professional service. Either the community or the fire department simply decided that the staffing model they would use for that is going to be utilizing volunteer firefighters and EMS responders. The other side of that is we need to continue to be proud of the fact that we are volunteers, and that it's volunteers that are providing those vital services to the community, saving them thousands and perhaps millions and nationally billions of dollars in tax revenue, compared to the financial impacts of the alternatives that would be required if we lost our volunteers in our volunteer fire department. So it's a critical point of consensus that we have to come to that forms the basis for a lot of our conversations moving forward. So here's my first real burning question for you. And again, somewhat of a rhetorical one, but the majority of the fires we fight are A, on the fire ground, or B, in the firehouse. Now, I have literally had the opportunity to ask this question of thousands of firefighters across the US and Canada, and I can honestly tell you that no one has ever answered A. So if we agree that the majority of, and hopefully we're only talking about the proverbial fires that we fight are in the firehouse and not on the fire ground, why is it that we invest all of our time, our energy, and especially our money in the exact opposite proportion on all the things that we know to be 100% useless without the proper quantity and quality of people to make it work? That's a question we have to ask ourselves, and it's an attitude that we have to change, and we have to change our perspective towards how we make those investments. So the next step up is doing a 360, and that's a recruitment and retention assessment. And really, in the time allotted today, all I'm going to do is step you through some processes, some tools and resources that can help you and your volunteer fire department to simply identify a status check, a sit rep, if you will, as to where your organization stands in both retention of your existing volunteers and the opportunities to bring new people into your organizations. So the first part of that recruitment retention assessment is to go through an exercise I call a DJJS or DS exercise, identifying specifically hyperlocal for your agency and your community reasons why people don't join, stay, and don't stay in your organization or in the volunteer fire service as a whole. If we had time today, we would go through this exercise, and I can tell you that just like in some of the game shows, the number one answer on the board for reasons people don't join and also why they don't stay is time. Everybody thinks that they don't have the time to volunteer. So how do we address just that singular challenge of lack of time for volunteering? I think there's tremendous opportunity to reframe the conversation. Many of you participating and watching, listening today are likely what I categorize as the superstars of our volunteer fire service. You have a laundry list of organizations and activities that you're involved in with active families and lifestyles and everything that goes with it. Yet you somehow manage to fit volunteering and being active in your volunteer fire and EMS agency into your very active lifestyle. So I think there's tremendous opportunity to showcase those superstars, all of you, of our volunteer fire service, to show people how it can be done, how it is possible, and most importantly, how it's the right investment of their time and their energy. We'll talk about reasons people don't stay, but the real heart of the matter here is, as you go through this exercise, things you want to watch for is which lists are longer: don't join and don't stay, or reasons people do join and do stay in your organization. If the reasons they join and stay outweigh the reasons they don't join and they don't stay, you probably have a healthy outlook on your organization. If the reasons people don't join and don't stay swallow up all the reasons people do join and they stay, we've got some work to do within your organization. Identify those areas of why people aren't joining and they're not staying. Identify what is within your reach to have an impact on. Write off and cut your losses as to what you can't have any impact on. But most importantly, focus on what I call the sweet spot of this Recruitment and Retention Assessment Center. And that is all the great reasons people do join your organization, and just as importantly, all the reasons people stay in your organization. Figure out how to do more of that, figure out how to do it better, and actually incorporate those reasons into your recruitment messaging and specifically into your one-on-one conversations that you're having with prospective members to your organization. And again, this will be part of what is shared with you after the seminar is done, but this basically is the cheat sheet as to how to go through that recruitment and retention assessment center process. Again, with the bottom line, focus on that sweet spot, figure out how to do more of it, and how to proliferate those great benefits that you offer to enhance your marketing efforts. The last part of that Recruitment Retention Assessment Center is to, as I say, wipe out the WMDs, the weapons of membership destruction. Those are the reasons that you're going to put into specifically the reasons people don't stay in your organization. That's really what's killing your organization, because on one day we may say that recruitment is our biggest challenge, and the next day we may say that it's retention. The reality is that those two terms are so interdependent that we really can't talk about one without the other. Your ability to retain qualified and happy volunteers directly impacts your ability to recruit new volunteers to join your ranks. Your ability to recruit new people and bring fresh blood in your organization has a direct impact on your ability to retain the qualified services of the volunteers that you already have. So the bottom line is, as we look at all those reasons people don't join, stay, and leave your organization, focus first and foremost on wiping out the WMDs, the weapons of membership destruction. And you can see some of the examples that people have shared with me as I've gone through this exercise with now hundreds of fire departments across the country. Because the bottom line is, until we get our own house in order, we probably shouldn't be inviting new people into our house and our fire service family. That has to be an effort that is addressed immediately, and it's something that has to be an ongoing focus throughout your organization of wiping out those WMDs. So let's talk quickly about identifying what are the characteristics, traits, and attributes we're looking for in today's volunteers. Wouldn't it be great if you could just go down to the volunteer firefighter store, pick up the package, flip it over, look at the values and attributes and characteristics that this particular model offers, look at the price tag, how much is this going to cost me, maybe the warranty information, and we pick it off the shelf and we go to the register and we pay the cashier. It's not quite that simple. So we need to identify who specifically are we looking for? What are those characteristics, those traits, those attributes, those values that we're looking for in today's volunteers? And what I'm about to share with you is simply a list of common responses that I've gotten by going through this exercise again with many firefighters and fire service organizations. The first one that pops up to mind is intelligent and street smart. We both know there's a significant difference between those two terms. Another name for street smart is common sense. And unfortunately, some of us are of the opinion, and perhaps there's a considerable validity to it, that that common sense is not as common today as we would hope it to be. So beyond common sense, caring and compassion. What happens when we lose our caring and compassion in fire and emergency services? My blunt answer to that is it's either time for a boot or hopefully only a reboot. Hopefully we can reclaim that caring and that compassion that probably drew us to this service, but also what keeps us going every single day. Healthy and tough. Those two words are, again, very similar, but they could be distinctly different as well. Somebody could be healthy, but not necessarily tough. Somebody could look tough, but not necessarily be healthy. But healthy is probably the best term for who we're looking for. Certainly dependable, dedicated, committed, all of those words are people that we're looking for in today's volunteer fire service. I say time and time again that this is a volunteering opportunity like absolutely none other. This isn't just in time volunteering where there's a flood coming through our town and you're going to go down and in a flurry of activity help fill sandbags to hold back the floodwaters. It's also not just once a week commitment where perhaps you're handing out food at a soup kitchen or a homeless shelter or something similar to that. We're pretty much asking the person who comes to our door demonstrating an interest in learning more about volunteering with us, we're pretty much asking them for a lifetime commitment, or certainly at the very least a multi-year commitment right off the bat. That's not for everybody. And we simply have to cut our losses and help those who come to our door to understand that it is the right opportunity for them or that it's not. The earlier we can do that in the process, the more time and energy we'll save for them, and the more we'll save for ourselves as well. Is a sense of humor handy in the fire service? Absolutely. Probably our greatest survival tool, but also probably our greatest weapon that we sometimes use against each other. And I talk often of the appropriate and inappropriate use of dark humor. Probably one of the greatest coping and compensating mechanisms we have at our immediate disposal. But the problem is when that dark humor becomes the norm instead of the exception, it can become problematic and even cancerous and toxic in ourselves and in our organization. Dr. Harry Carter, a dear friend and mentor of mine, wrote an article in 1989 that hung on the bulletin board in the Fire Academy office that I worked in for 20 years in Erie County. And it was titled, "Are You a Good Follower?" And he used the example to demonstrate that before we should even think about calling ourselves a leader, we first need to learn to be a good follower. And regardless of how far you move up in the ranks of your organization, you should still always follow someone else, if only a higher being as well to guide you on your path. Community conscious, we can never lose sight of who we're working for. The people that make it all possible, but the people who we have committed our lives and our time to serving in every variety of ways imaginable. It's a opportunity to go and serve. And I talk often that I feel bad for those who don't get to carry a pager like we do. Because every time I think I'm having a bad day or things are off, that pager goes off reminding me that, you know what, my day pales in comparison to those I have the opportunity to go and serve. And sometimes it's just that perspective, that gift of perspective that we need to keep us going through all the things that we're exposed to that are quite often difficult on so many levels. But that's what is going to help us through. And the last key point that I hear as a response to those characteristics, traits, and attributes is technologically sound. And that is not just an expectation of the young or the young at heart, but it's an expectation of everyone in the fire service today. And if you're still referring to yourself as technologically illiterate, we need to figure out how to get you some literacy. Because again, technology is pervasive in everything that we do. And that's what we're going to need to keep up with and stay ahead of the curve of serving our communities. So now we're going to talk about strategy, and I'm big on process. I spent my first childhood or my first career, however you look at it, in engineering and sales and marketing management. So I'm very big on process, but having processes in place are critical to making progress in your organization. And as the old adage goes, a failure to plan is a plan for failure. You need an action plan. And again, this is a resource that we'll provide to you in the follow-up email that Provident will share with you. But it starts with, and we'll touch on this later, adopting an adapt and overcome attitude. Why is it that we can apply an adapt and overcome attitude to absolutely anything that the customer can think of or dream up to throw at us? But when it comes to back to those firehouse fires, those people issues, those dark, sticky, muddy, ugly issues that are uncomfortable conversations to have, why is it that we instead stick our head in the sand and hope that they go away? We need to apply that same adopt and adapt and overcome attitude to our recruitment and retention challenges. And you can see the list as it goes through, but it needs to be comprehensive and it needs to go from start to finish. Because if we don't go through these types of processes, we'll never be able to understand where we are now, where we're headed, and worst case is, we'll never know when we've gotten there. We'll never know when we've made progress or achieved our goals for recruitment and retention success. So the next part of the process I want to step you through is what I call mapping the volunteer life cycle. And we're only going to have time to touch specifically on the recruitment phase of this, but how do we take somebody from a prospect, from the unknown, that they don't know, they're unaware that there even volunteering opportunities exist to a candidate where they actually demonstrate an interest in your organization and learning more and make an inquiry. And then what is our conversion rate from candidate where they're interested in exploring and demonstrate that interest in learning more and getting them to that next step where they actually fill out an application. And here's an example of a mapping a volunteer life cycle. I created this several years ago based on my own volunteer fire company and also as it related specifically to our county's recruitment and retention efforts that I was responsible for over 20 years. So you can see from that hand scroll diagram that there are several steps when you really break it down in the volunteer life cycle. And the major components of the volunteer life cycle are what I refer to as the recruiting phase, right? So that's from the moment of inquiry to them actually being approved to membership. Beyond that is the orientation and the onboarding phase, getting them to the point where they can be contributing members of our organization, taking on additional responsibilities, starting their training path and their growth path. And everything after that is pretty much retention, progress, and personal and professional development until they retire from the fire service and exit in whatever form that looks like. So I encourage you to go back to your own volunteer fire department and literally on a whiteboard or a chalkboard or perhaps on a piece of paper or a computer screen, map out all of the steps, map out all of the documents, the processes, the elements, the touch points, and the interactions that take place between you, your organization, all of the key players, and the candidate who has demonstrated an interest in joining your volunteer organization. And I think you'll find when you do so and go through that exercise, there's a lot of moving pieces and parts. And the other thing I encourage you to look at is, where are we losing people? Where are the gaps that people are falling out of our organization? Is it between the inquiry and the application phase and our conversion rate there is low? Or is it from the application phase to them actually being approved and welcomed into our membership, depending on how that approval process works in your organization? Or like my department and many others, do we tend to lose people most often in the onboarding phase? Because once we are done with the courting and we both parties put so much time and energy into coming together, we sometimes let that relationship fade and we kind of leave them hanging out there, so to speak, with little support or direction. That's a common trap to fall into and something that most of us have to address in our organizations. The other thing I encourage you to do as you look at this volunteer life cycle map is identify the time between each of the steps and ask yourself, is that time appropriate? And is it appropriate to your organization? So it gives you enough time to make sure that this candidate is the right fit for your organization and also your fire service family, which is really what we're inviting them to join. And also, is it appropriate to the candidate? Is it making effective use of their time? Is it taking too long? Can we shorten some things up? Or in certain instances, do we need to actually lengthen the time between steps or processes to make sure that we have enough good intel that we can truly get to know that person to help them make the right decision as to whether or not they are the right fit for the organization and the organization is the right fit for them. The next step is you need a needs assessment. And again, this is something I'm willing to share with you as you reach back through contact after this webinar. But quantitatively, how many new volunteers do you need? And I can tell you that many chiefs and officers and even firefighters will give me the stock answer, as many as I can get. I say that's the wrong answer because it's a be careful what you wish for situation. The real question is, how many new volunteers can you support logistically, financially, emotionally, and organizationally as well, and culturally as well? If you had a sudden influx of, say, 5 or 10 new members all at once or in a very short period of time, would that have an impact on the overall culture of your organization? The answer is probably yes. So there's definitely opportunities to look at all of that. Most importantly, what do you need them for? If we don't ask upfront, what do we need them for? What we end up doing is the equivalent of what I call warm body-based recruiting, where we take anyone and everyone who demonstrates an interest in being a part of our organization, and we try to fit a square peg into a round hole. We don't really have a spot for them based on their time and availability, their knowledge, skills, and abilities, their goals, and their wants and their needs. But we then focus a lot of time and energy, and often waste that time and energy trying to make them fit when really we knew from the start it just wasn't going to work. A way to correct that situation is by having job descriptions up front. And when you have those job descriptions, I encourage you to also include those characteristics, traits, and attributes that you're looking for in your prospective volunteers, because that will help paint a picture of the total commitment that's going to be required and the total person that you're looking for in your new volunteers. Excuse me. So as you go through that needs assessment process, it could be something, just a little more sophisticated than what I affectionately refer to as a bar napkin analysis, to simply charting something on a flip chart or a whiteboard, looking at all the roles, responsibilities, ranks, and functions within your organization and saying, what are we doing well? What could we do better with either a larger quantity of people or the right quality of people? And what are we simply not doing? And are those gaps that we need to recruit specifically for those opportunities in our organization? In every organization, we have different layers. We have the officers, we have the doers or the worker bees of the organization, who may be the formal or informal leaders in your organization. We have operational members, but there's also so many other things that have to be done within a volunteer fire department that have nothing to do with putting apparatus on the street and responding to emergencies. But they're still very critical to our organization. They're still very necessary. And we need to identify ways to diversify our workforce to bring people into our organization who are either physically unable or are not interested in performing those operational roles. And again, starting with a job description saying, do you have a skill set, time, and energy available to fulfill this very specific non-operational need within our organization? And again, looking at those characteristics, traits, and attributes that are very common in responses to that. Or we can get more sophisticated. And this is a tool and a resource that I've created as well. Looking at specifically every single officer position, every single specialty assignment, and both administratively and operational in your organization. And again, how many do we currently have? How many do we feel we need to effectively get the job done? What's our gap analysis, our plus or minus, and then prioritize each of those positions. And I encourage you to recruit specifically to those positions. Again, starting with the job description that is going to outline the expectations early and often. So again, I can't overstress enough, starting job descriptions with those characteristics, traits, and attributes. Do you have an inquiry form either on your fire department website or even a paper form that's attached to either your prospective member guide, which is a simple and effective way of, again, helping them very quickly identify whether or not it's the right volunteering opportunity for them, or is it attached to the application package? Because the last thing you want somebody to do or you want to happen is somebody shows up at your firehouse and asks for an application or prospective member guide. Joe Smith, firefighter, hands them the application or prospective member guide. A couple of days later, you hear, hey, somebody stopped by the station and I gave them an application. And you ask them, okay, who was it and where are they from? And they have that blank stare, that deer in the headlights look on their face. The inquiry form in print form, or for those inquiries that come in via your social media to your website, need to capture some basic contact information so that you can respond to that interest and maintain that interest throughout the process, but do so as quickly as possible. What does your application package include? Background checks, other information, questions about previous volunteering experience in or outside of fire and emergency services. Do you have a standardized interview package and interview questions? That's critical, and it's legally critical to your organization as well. For the most part, you cannot, you have to ask the same questions of every candidate. Otherwise, it tips the scales unfairly, and somebody could claim that there's discrimination in the way that that interview was conducted. Do you have such things as a swearing-in ceremony, a oath of membership, and or a volunteer commitment form that outlines both the expectations of the new volunteer to the organization, but just if not more of importance is their organization's commitment back to the volunteer. New member orientations and toolkits and certainly task books and things of that nature are all part of the process of progressing your recruitment and retention efforts. This is an example of a candidate application process checklist, a written form. If you aren't using a spreadsheet, or as we do for a lot of our customers, we integrate and adapt CRMs, customer relationship management software systems, to recruitment and retention and onboarding workflow that makes sense for your organization. But again, this is going to make sure that no candidates fall through the cracks, that there's accountability within your organization as to who is accomplishing each step, and most importantly, that you're keeping the prospective member engaged and informed throughout the entire process. Another examples of standardized questions for the interview. This is not an end-all, just a sample of it. Personal reference interviews, if that's something that you do, although there's debate as to whether or not those are valid interactions and whether or not you're truly going to get good information from people who have been listed as a personal reference. Save the environment. This applies in so many ways, but one way that it applies is, what is the environment in which you're actually interviewing your prospective candidates? Are you bringing them into a room where there's 12, a jury of their peers on the other side of the table, and they're at the end of a long, conference table with a bright light over their head? What do you call the committee or the group that actually conducts that interview? I've worked with departments and know of departments that they actually refer to it as a interrogation committee. And my response to that is, can you actually be found guilty of wanting to volunteer in a fire and emergency services? So that environment is critical, but more so than that, what environment as an organization and a culture are you bringing them into? Are you inclusive? And inclusive starts with simply being open and warm and welcoming to everyone. And that's critical. First impressions are important over and over again. So like I said earlier, as we look to weed out the weapons of membership destruction, we need to make sure that we built the right environment to welcome them into. And if we're not there yet, then maybe we do need to do some house cleaning first before we invite anybody else in, to make sure that what we're selling matches what we're actually giving to them. So now we're going to talk about some strategies and specifically tactics for recruitment success. And what I've done is created a 3-tier approach for recruitment success. It starts at the clearinghouse level, and that's building a broad-based awareness that volunteering opportunities even exist within your organization. So many departments I talk to have such an awareness issue that they're even a volunteer fire department. They have an identity crisis. Partly, in many instances, because the word volunteer doesn't appear anywhere. It's not on their station. It's not on their apparatus. It's not on their apparel. It's not on their letterhead. It's not in their logo or their patch. So how would we even expect people to know that it's a volunteering opportunity? That's where the marketing comes in. And that marketing could be in a variety of forms, both offline and online. Tools and education. I'm big on teaching people to fish when it comes to recruitment and retention. It's having the right tools and resources to look professional, to look prepared, and to look inviting to a prospective candidate to your organization. And there's an educational process to that. I teach a ton of recruitment and retention, what I call boot camps. And everything that I do in a consulting format and or directly in instruction is all about helping others understand the need for processes and how to apply those processes in their real world situations. But the last here is probably the most important one, and that's what I call the trench work, where the hand-to-hand combat of getting them in the door and keeping them there is won and lost. That's something that I and no one else can do for you. At the end of the day, we can build that broad-based awareness. We can drive leads and potential recruits to your firehouse door. But if you can't respond to them in a timely manner, and timely today means 24 to 48 hours as a maximum, or what they're seeing on the inside in their first introduction and their first impression does not match up to what you're promoting on the outside, you're going to lose that battle. So that's all the more reason we have to look internal inside our organizations before we go outside to bring other people to it. And from that, the bottom line is we all need to be committed to volunteer enlistment. As I say to many a fire chief or administrator within departments, if you're not focused on recruitment and retention, what are you focused on? Because none of that other stuff matters without the proper quantity and quality of people to make it work. Everything else, the firehouse, the station, the facilities, the training props, the training centers, the apparatus and the equipment, all of those are just widgets, 100% useless without the proper quantity and quality of people to make them work. And I cannot stress enough the importance of quality over quantity when it comes to our people. It all starts with an attitude, and that is treating every single imaginable public interaction as a public service, public education, public relations, and a recruitment opportunity. We have made careers out of public service and getting that part down pat. Public education, we get better at every day, and the impact and the results of that are obvious. We're going to less and less fires every day, and that's important. I've long said that we are the only business in business to put ourselves out of business. Now, truth be told, we know that will truly never happen, but still, it doesn't mean that we should always choose prevention over suppression as part of fire and life safety education. And public relations is key. On one hand, we can't expect that somebody else is going to tell our story for us, and we don't want them to. And also, we need to constantly be building up the bank of what I call community equity to ensure that we have a positive image in our community and that we are still held in that coveted position of being the go-to guys and gals for everything that they need to make their lives better throughout your community in a variety of forms. But looking at every one of those instances as a recruitment opportunity at school, at work, at church, in every public building, in every local business that will partner with you, at incident scenes, looking for people who are attracted to what we do, taking the time to stop and answer questions that they may have, and just being simply available and aware of the opportunities that are presented to you. So we're going to talk very quickly about some specific marketing strategies as we go to wrap up here today. One of the very first things you're going to need to decide is, are we going to take a shotgun approach or are we going to take a sniper approach? A shotgun approach is building that broad-based awareness that volunteering opportunities exist in your organization and in your community. Or are you going to take a sniper approach, building job descriptions and job performance expectations and marketing around that targets specifically to fill a particular role or an opportunity or the type of person that you're looking for in your organization. There is power in numbers, and leverage the power of referral of the members that you already have. As a marketing person, I can tell you at the end of the day, there is no more powerful marketing tool than each and every one of you. And it's mathematically exemplified by this. If each of your existing members recruited just one new member to your organization, what mathematical impact would it have on your fire department? The obvious answer is it would double it. So sometimes we can't see the forest through the trees, and we think of this big, overwhelming recruitment challenge when really what we need is one new member, one at a time, and to build off of each of those wins to build a bigger and better team. Certainly, you need to look at those weapons of membership destruction and overcome the objections as to why people don't join or why they don't think they can join. But again, diversity is an outcome of inclusion, and we also need to diversify our workforce in order to survive. Looking at offering alternative volunteering opportunities and the way in which we offer them the opportunity to engage and serve within our organizations as well. And from there, we start to whittle it down to, is the majority of our campaign going to be online? Or are we going a little old school and doing it offline, more direct community engagement through in-person and interactive events and volunteering opportunities? And at the end of the day, and I don't say this selfishly, but we're good at a lot of things in the fire service. Sometimes recruitment and marketing are not our greatest assets. Do what you do best, outsource the rest. If you're struggling today, you're likely going to be struggling tomorrow, perhaps without some outside intervention. So take that into consideration. And whether it's engaging with an organization like First Arriving, or it's looking locally inside your community as to partner agencies that could help you in that endeavor, don't be afraid to look outside the fire service for solutions to challenges within it. Know your market, know where you fit into that market and the product that you're actually promoting or selling, which is your services and the great volunteering opportunities and the benefits that come with all of it. Build your brand and your image and your message around that. And here's my 4-point test of an effective recruitment message. First and foremost, it has to be believable. If somebody throws up the BS flag, well, we have some work to do. It has to be livable by you. So if you say you're the best, you have to live that every day, and it has to be believable. It has to be memorable, and it has to be repeatable, because at the end of the day, it's you and your members who have to sell that message at every public interaction that they might have. And lastly, and most importantly, keep the message positive. There is so much negative messaging going on in the space today that quite honestly is not helping our situation. It's actually hurting it. Departments and fire service organizations that are putting out the call that we're on our last leg and our last life before we go into, flatlining, is doing absolutely nothing to help them. And it's doing absolutely nothing to help anyone else. This particular headline, new concerns, Pennsylvania's firefighter shortage could spread nationwide. That was pre-pandemic. They're making it out to sound like it's a pandemic, like one person's problems could actually spread to every fire department across the country. And we need to do whatever we can to stem the tide. And I understand that a lot of people are frustrated. They are feeling desperate, but there's help on the way. And it's, again, doing absolutely nothing to build confidence that A, you're providing the services or even capable of providing those services to community, which they already have an expectation for. Because at the end of the day, nobody wants to join the Titanic desperate for volunteers fire department. We're going down is not an effective recruitment message. But when you see those fear-mongering headlines, that's exactly the message that we're sending to a lot of people. And it just erodes the confidence of our communities in their fire department, whether they're actually in that boat themselves or not. So whether you're flush with volunteers or you've managed to flush your volunteers, that's doing absolutely nothing to help your situation. So keep the message positive. And Ed, And Sam, I'm going to end on that note, and I think we're in a position where we can open things for questions.
Tiger, thanks for a very informative presentation. And look, folks, having attended several of Tiger's presentations in person and having attended other recruiting and retention seminars across the country, I realized trying to take an hour and cover everything we could cover is an impossibility. So we'll take some questions that we may have now. We had one earlier. Somebody says, could I possibly get a copy of the recruitment forms? Thank you.
Hey, Ed and Tiger. Tiger, thank you again. This is Sam. Yeah, in the Q&A, I did answer, Tiger, if we could get those and then we can send them out to everyone, those recruitment forms. And then along with the, we'll record this webinar, upload it to YouTube, and we'll send out that link as well.
Absolutely, Sam and Ed. There's a lot of resources, and we'll send you the links to all of them. We just simply hope that it helps you in your endeavors, and please certainly don't hesitate to call on us if we can ever be of service to you.
Well, once again, Tiger, thanks very much for a very informative presentation. I know, like I said, after attending several of your presentations in person and listening to you today, there are solutions to the recruiting and retention issues. Now it's a matter of people making the commitment to take action, to do, to take some of the advice you gave today and take some action to turn things around. And I especially like your message about keeping the message positive. I know it can be difficult to do, especially when you're in a leadership position. You're trying to figure out where the next group of people are coming from. But I honestly believe that the more positive we can keep our message, the better off we'll be. And with that in mind, Tiger, how about telling our listeners how they can take advantages of the services a first arriving has to offer?
Sure. Thank you for that opportunity, Ed. This not designed as an infomercial, so to speak, but certainly I'm blessed to be in a position to help so many people on such a larger scale, even than I was able to do in my time at the government level of focusing on recruitment and retention. And that's something I take very seriously, and obviously I'm very passionate about this issue. And have made it my life's mission to do everything within my power to ensure the survival and the success of the volunteer fire service, because not only is it needed from a monetary stance, where in so many communities, if they can't afford the free services we're already providing now, they certainly can't afford the alternatives, right? And we're seeing a lot of that in a lot of ways, in a lot of places. But most importantly, I think too, another underlying reason as to why we need to ensure the sustainability of the volunteer fire service is because it is truly such a key part of our communities. It literally is a part of the fabric of our communities. And because it's based on all the right values, it's based on selfless service. So again, I'm very passionate and motivated in all of that. Certainly go to our website, firstarriving.com. You'll not only see there an online catalog of, if you will, of all the ways that we are able to help people, and a large sampling of all the people we've been able to help with tremendous success. And I always use the accident injury attorney disclaimer to that. Previous results do not guarantee future success, right? But because it is so hyper local, right? And if anybody tells you that there's a one size fits all or a silver bullet solution to anything that you're doing related to recruitment and retention, I say time out. That's fake news, right? So it has to be very customized for your situation, your condition, but most importantly, the opportunities that you have to be successful in recruitment and retention in your community. So also the other thing I'll point you to on our website is literally the blogs that I've written specifically to recruitment and retention. They're really toolkits is what they are. They provide insight, but again, we take a very much and teach you to fish type approach to everything that we do. So a very educational approach, just the same way the Provident Insurance does a great job at, and that you've made your life doing as well, Ed. So there's some very specific things as to both strategy, but most importantly, tactics and how you can actually apply those solutions to your situation.
So again, I want to mention the website of firstarriving.com. Go check it out. And as Tiger pointed out earlier, do what you do best. And if you need to outsource the rest, don't be afraid to ask for help.
Right.
So for all those that registered for the webinar today, we'll be emailing you these links. We'll also be uploading this presentation to our Provident YouTube page if you'd like to watch it again or share it. As a reminder, there will be a very short 5-question survey at the end of the program. Please take the time to complete it. If you have any questions or need additional resources from today, or you have an idea for a future webinar, please email us at info@providentins.com. We'll get back to you as soon as we can. This wraps up another informative Provident webinar. Join us in June for a webinar with Jack Sullivan from the Responder Safety Institute, when we discuss what you can do better to protect yourself and your people when working an incident on the highway. We'll share the registration link to this event in our email with all of you. Also, keep an eye open for an upcoming podcast with Ed Klima from the First Responder Center for Excellence, as he tells you about the great work they're doing on behalf of emergency services. Until then, stay healthy, stay safe, and thanks for listening.